Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I'd like to start by expressing that I offer you complete permission to use my full name if you choose to publish this account. I'd also like to mention that the text was copied and pasted from a supernatural story submission form I completed for an internet series. I committed suicide when I was approximately 11 years old. There was a lot going on at the moment that was heavy on my mind. I won't go into too many details to keep my story short, but I will say that I'm practically cut off from most of my blood family because I helped put several of them and people in their inner circles in prison who either knew about or helped cover up the events. Though some of you will try to make fun of the situation, when you combine that with targeted attacks at school because I was taller than everyone else, it becomes difficult to deal with. I had had enough and resolved to end it all one night. That's when things began to shift, and I realized something bigger was at work. Something happened that seemed to stop time as I began to feel my life slipping away. I honestly don't know if this was because I was dead or just on the verge of death, but what happened next utterly overwhelmed my senses as a bright blue flash of light emerged out of nowhere. It appeared to transport me to another world. When my eyes adjusted, I realized I was in the middle of a blue abyss, for lack of a better word. There was nothing in my immediate vicinity. I was just floating in space. I tried to move, but it appeared like only my eyes could move. I took a few moments to observe my surroundings and noted that light, air, and even space itself appeared to flow as if I were underwater. This dude materialized in front of me out of nowhere. Although his image was fuzzy, I could pick out a few characteristics as he neared me. He was tall, had long brown hair, wore a white robe, and exuded a compassionate aura. I could see he cared about my well-being, yet didn't pass judgment on my activities. "Dakota, there's something coming to see you," he remarked as he came to a halt about 10 feet away from me. The man moved aside, and what he showed me was possibly the greatest life-changing thing I had ever seen. A little child stood behind the father, crying as she glanced at me. My heart dropped at the sight of her, and I felt guilty about what I was doing. I was completely enthralled as she ran up to me when I noticed she looked a lot like me. My body sagged as whatever was holding me in place gave way just enough for me to grasp the child. Her body slammed into me, her tears pouring into my chest, and her entirely being shook as she gagged on her words. I held her tight, trying to find the proper words to say. Seconds felt like an eternity. The tiny child wiggles free, just long enough to stare me in the eyes. She eventually talked to me, leaving me with words that have stayed with me to this day. "Please, Daddy, don't do it." I couldn't say anything else because I was too surprised. The child must have realized this because she leaned in to kiss me on the cheek. The sensation of her kisses against my flesh was enough to terminate the vision. I opened my eyes to find myself seated on my bed, exactly as I was minutes before I decided to harm myself. What had just transpired was too powerful for me to comprehend at the time, and I'm still struggling to find the right words to convey it. So I went to bed to sleep on it, only to have the same scenario play out in my nightmares. Most folks I've told the story to expected I'd never hear anything further about this strange man or the ethereal little girl. They obviously don't know much about me. I needed to know what had happened to me. What was his name? Was that the same small kid as my daughter? I had to find out. My discoveries, or at least the ones I've developed since then, have just added to the enigma. It was also the point at which I recognized that what I'd been going through my entire life was not normal. I started looking for the little girl to check if she was my daughter. I knew the only way I'd know for sure would be the day I was in the hospital delivery room, so I assumed I'd settle for attempting to figure out how and why she was able to appear to me in the first place. The closest examples I could identify were parents who were already expecting their child to have visions or phantom visits. That made logic, but there was a problem. I didn't even have my first kiss. If a lady was out there carrying my child, there would be more issues. My study into why the small girl appeared had come to a halt, so I focused on the man. What was his name? How could he know who I was? How did he get involved in this? I had a few ideas, but I decided it would be wiser to talk with the different gurus I've met over the years to obtain better perspectives. The same result was reached by psychic mediums, priests, demonologists, other investigators, and even a few therapists. That strange man who appeared was not human. All indications seemed to point to the man being an archangel. To be specific, Archangel Michael. Needless to say, the thought of an archangel intervening to bring me back from the grave 4 times was overpowering. I was simply a child from the small Idaho hamlet of Murtaugh. The only thing that seemed special about me was that I was a foot taller than my classmates. I tried to find out why this was happening, but all I got was something along the lines of, "Be patient. It's all a part of God's plan for you." I was at a loss on what else to do in order to gain answers. I even tried summoning both the small girl and Michael to acquire more information, but I was only given snippets. This left me with little choice but to live out the rest of my life as usual, hoping for some sort of sign. The tiny child would keep appearing at moments when my life was threatened, or simply to attempt to cheer me up when I was feeling bad. Her appearances were so frequent that I gave her a name since it felt strange to keep referring to her as the little girl over and over. Olivia was the first name that came to mind, and when I asked her if she was comfortable with it, she replied she loved it. Until recently, there were 2 additional instances in which Olivia appeared that provided me further hints about how to bring her into my life, most notably discovering who her mother is. The first was the day my grandfather died of cancer. I had to help keep the other kids and my grandmother's dog confined in a bedroom so that emergency professionals could do their jobs. Olivia arrived in the room where my grandfather was resting and taking his last gasps of life, and she allowed me to use her eyes to observe my grandfather's soul leave his body and vanish with the souls who had come to take him. The second event occurred when I was involved in an automobile accident. The Chrysler 300 I was driving at the time had a problem with bucking, which seemed like someone was pounding on the brakes and gas pedal at the same time over and over. The car began acting up at a hazardous intersection, causing me to be hit by a pickup truck traveling at 60 miles per hour. Olivia emerged and cried, "Daddy, look out," just before I was hit. I observed the aforementioned blue light on impact, but it was masked by a man's figure. "Be more careful next time, DT," remarked whoever was obstructing me. My grandfather was the only one who ever addressed me by that name. The final event occurred in 2016 while I was on a riverside excursion in Paris. I was attempting to face the elements in order to see the Eiffel Tower light show. Everyone else was on the lower deck, so I assumed I was alone on the top side. When I felt a tap on my shoulder, I instinctively reacted, believing it was another tourist requesting me to stand aside because I was in the way of a photo. But when I turned around, my jaw fell. Olivia and my grandfather was standing behind me. I questioned what they were doing there, and they said they weren't going to be there as much anymore. They went on to suggest that I wouldn't need their advice anymore, but that they would check in on me from time to time. My grandfather then said he was proud of me before leaving me alone with Olivia for a few moments. She began to say goodbye when I interrupted her to ask if she could tell me anything about her mother. "Don't worry, Daddy," Olivia said. "Mommy's on her way. Simply keep battling. Mommy will need you to fight for her," she said, before fading into the night. There was one woman in particular who I mistook for Olivia's mother. I even proposed to her, thinking I was about to finish an almost decade-long search. However, she was murdered a few months before I left for Paris by the father of the kid she was 5 months pregnant with at the time. Olivia hadn't shown for about a year before then, so I couldn't ask her for confirmation. But hearing her confirm that the search was not finished was reassuring, as was seeing my grandfather one more time. He was my only stable father figure. That was the most information I had to offer the previous times I told folks about my ongoing adventure. Since then, there has been a probable hit on Olivia's mother's identity, but it turned out to be a misidentified thought form of a lady suffering from severe mental stress. It's a lengthy story, but for those of you who are curious, yes, I have a new person in my life, and every part of me tells me she's the one. But here's where things become difficult. The very fact that I saw into the future is enough to alter the path of events. Maybe having a direct line to an archangel will help things stay the same. In truth, it's difficult to determine how my sharing this will affect things, but it appears to benefit individuals who hear it. All indicators are that if I continue to live my life and help as many people as I can, I'll be able to see my daughter again and live the life I've always desired. I suppose I should also state unequivocally that this is exactly what is happening. The events that brought me to this point are long gone. I own several enterprises, get to use my creative side on a regular basis, helped numerous people, have toured the bulk of the Northern Hemisphere, have fantastic friends, and met the woman of my dreams, who I may have written about in one of my books roughly 4 years before we met. While things aren't ideal, life has never been better. At the time of writing, I'm almost 24 years old. I recognize that this entire incident might be an indication of something significantly wrong with my thinking. I'm also aware that many of the supernatural theories I've gathered may be proven untrue, and I'm fine with that. Nonetheless, I am aware that there is significantly more to our world than meets the eye, and that ignoring to explore the possibilities is one of the most terrible crimes one can conduct against themselves.